Hello again guys, welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video here at the House of Devlin. Thank you very much for tuning in. All views are welcome, all comments are welcome, so please feel free to participate in every way that you feel free. Um, Now today's video is a video continuing our discussion about paganism, and we're looking at a very specific part. Um, when we've been looking at the runes, for example, we've been looking at fate and how it completes actions, and we've been looking at that in quite a lot of detail, but from a sort of a step back, so to speak. We've been looking at the grander scale of things. We've been looking at how, for example, well, what is fate? If you haven't watched that video, go watch it. That's my advice. But if you don't have time to watch it, I'll sum it up quickly. What is fate? Fate is the stuff in the universe, the power, the driving force behind the universe that gets shit done. That's pretty much what it is, and it gets shit done by having the intention, sorry, not the intention, the seeking out or the desire of Fehu, the strength of Ruse, the willpower of Fuizas, the intention and direction of Onsus, the purpose of Rado, so on and so forth, right? And what we're going to be looking at is at how fate, and more specifically Ansus and Rado, which is Ansus is intention or direction, the completion of an action, a fulfillment of a probability in a certain direction. So it shows that there's some degree of intelligence behind fate, that an action occurs in a specific manner, in a specific way, at a specific time. Okay, because of the intention and also the purpose of Rado. Okay, combined means that we get a very specific fulfillment of a probability. It's not just random and jiggledy piggledy, so to speak. But we'll also be looking at fate at a closer level, as I say, in regards to the composition of fate. What is in a strand of fate is what I'm trying to say. Sometimes it's hard. You can get bogged down in language, but simply put, what we're going to be looking at is what is in a strand of fate. Okay? We've already looked partly at that, as I say, in other videos, the sounds and the vibrations of the universe, which are the runes. But there's another element in there as well, which I will get into, that I believe is in a strand of fate, almost like a pre-programmed sort of aspect of it, that helps fulfill which is partly part of the intention and the sort of purpose aspects of fate, because these elements need to be controlled for fate to fulfill an action in this particular manner. Again, I'm getting bogged down in language, but I'm also doing what I'm going to discuss is not just what the composition of fate at this level. I want to discuss how I got to this conclusion, so you can see how my thought patterns and thought pathways sort of triggered. Okay, sometimes it comes from the higher learning centers. Most often it does. In this case, I believe it also did, because I wasn't really thinking about anything, and all of a sudden I got started thinking about all these things that I'd read before or seen before, and I was making links between them, but I was doing it almost subconsciously, or above consciousness. Okay, and I was basically remembering an excerpt from one of the poetic Eddas that the Vikings, well, the Nords, were so famous for, right? And this one comes from Hin Luiod, which translates as the Lay of Hindley. Okay, if I've pronounced that or anything that's about to come up incorrectly, I apologise. Please correct me. I'm trying my best. I go on Google Translate and everything to learn how to pronounce as best as possible, and YouTube also. There's some Danish people who sometimes read these words out. It's a great way to learn how to pronounce the words. But if I, for some reason, mispronounce any of these words, Don't slap me too hard, on the wrist. Just tell me and tell me, maybe phonetically spell it in the comments. Okay, so this the excerpt from the Poetic Edda goes as such, and it actually discusses essentially the origin of magic practitioners. And when we say the origin of magical practitioners, we mean the actual bloodlines of these practitioners. It hints basically, well, pretty much states quite, obviously, within this Poetic Edda. I have read it before in previous videos, but I'll repeat it here again. That basically those who practice magic are of a certain bloodline. They are able to practice magic, they are able to connect to the rune stones, or use Galdar magic, for example, or healing magic, or sorcery, or Seder magic, because they are they are of a certain bloodline that entitles them. It gives them a natural ability to use such magic. I'll give you my thoughts and beliefs on this after I've read out the excerpt, okay? So you can start formulating your own thoughts and beliefs before I give you mine. That's the way I like to teach, okay? Let you think first, and then I tell you how I think. We can come to some agreement. So all the Volvers are from Vidolf. All the Vitki are from Vild Madaya. All the Seder folk are from Svarthofdi, and all the Jotuns come from Emir. Now, that last comment is the most important comment out of all of them, really. All the Jotuns are just the old word for giant, come from Emir, who was the first of all giants. So that's true. All the Jotuns, all the giants do come from the very first of all the giants. In fact, the very first of all the gods. Emir, we come from Emir. We live on Emir, Midgard. Earth in this case. I like to think of the universe as Midgard, and Earth is the corpse of a Midgard, the corpse of Emir within the realm of Midgard, and it has the same name, traditionally speaking, but we are from Emir. We were carved from part of his body, essentially, by Odin and given life. So we are giant anyway. We know this. We are of giant's blood, but we are also a combination of giant's blood and the sort of infusion of self-awareness, this breath of ecstasy, the madness of the god that Odin gave us. We are also partly, obviously, Aisha also. Okay, our psychological aspect is heavily influenced by the Aisha gods, or the Aisha-Bani alliance, but specifically Aisha, or Odin himself, actually. But what it says above it, now that we know that basically they're saying that basically all giants are from Emir, then that pretty much, especially alongside the fact that the names are very giant-like, because the names of the gods really do tend to hint towards their bloodlines, okay? So for Loki, Odin, all that, they obviously as guardians, and then you've got Freya and her brother Freya, from Fjord, their father, and that they're from Vandenheim, and then you've got the giants, and the giants do typically have these kind of names that we have here. The only one that I would have thought maybe possibly might not be giant is the Seder folk, which is Svart Oddi. This is the hardest one to pronounce as well. Svarthofdi, okay, which feels or sounds like actually dwarf, but it could be like dwarf eater. It could translate into that, or friend of the dwarfs or something. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's from Svartalheim. That's where I'm getting that word from. Svartalheim is the realm of the dwarfs, right? So I'm just thinking Svarthofdi. That's it, Svarthofdi. It sounds a bit dwarf-like, but it is referencing the giants immediately after that. So we must assume all of these are giants. So if the Volvers, who are Vala, Vala is the English word for vulva. Okay, if these practiced a variety of different magics, they were able to practice shamanism, sorcery, and prophecy. They were able to practice prophecy, the prophetic element of Seder magic, but they weren't able to do the rest of Seder magic, just the prophecy side of it, things. Okay, Vitki, these and they were from the Volvas are apparently from Vidolf. Vitki, okay, are another group of magic practitioners who were categorized by the Nords, ancient Nordic people. And they were competent healers and practitioners of rune magic. And the Seder folk, pretty much in their name, they did Seder magic, okay, in its full completion. And bear in mind that Seder comes directly from Freya, the goddess Freya, okay. And they came from, as I say, that Svarthofdi, okay, whereas the Vitki came from Vilmida, okay. Now, the names and the pronunciation of the names don't really matter too much, but that is highly suggestive of, that Edda, is that, as I say, that magical practitioners are from a bloodline of giants. That is to say, that they must have the blood of giants running through them. They have the blood of men running through them also, because of course they are man, but they can be almost like half-breeds, almost like demigods, if you wish, in that sense. Or demi-giants, half-giant. Demi just means half, okay? And it's not too hard to really believe in that either, because when you look at the gods themselves, Loki, for example, he had a wife who was Asgardian, and he had one child with her, but he had 4 children, I believe it was, with the giantess Angrboda. Okay, Thor also had a child off a giant. Okay, also a giantess, but he had many children, obviously, with an Asgardian. They pretty much all the gods interbred with giants to some degree. They were kind of their mistresses, and what I'm trying to say is the interaction between 2 different bloodlines, or 2 different races of gods, so to speak, was very much evident. That we know about. It was a bit like Greco-Roman, Hellenistic sort of paganism. Where the gods would often, yes, breed, have sex with themselves, and have children amongst themselves, but also would have children with humans. And what I'm saying here, then, it's seemingly that the giants maybe are a bit promiscuous. Okay, yes, they'll have sex and children with their own kind, the other Jotuns. They'll do it with the gods, but it seems that they'll do it with men also. Because bear in mind, you might be thinking about the anatomy of it. A giant and a human might not work. The human's going to get crushed. Giant doesn't mean big in old language. It's just, eton is the old word for actual physical giant. But giant just has its own term. It's just a name, okay, just like Titan in again, the Greco-Roman aspect of it. Titan, it didn't really mean big, but it became to be mean big because they were generally big creatures. But giants, yes, they can be big. Obviously Ymir was huge, but they were more often than not human sized. Okay, and they were shape changers anyway, so they could change the shape. Even if they were big, they could become a human in appearance and size. Okay, now why have I told you about that when we're discussing the composition of fate? Seems a bit of a long-winded way and an unrelated discussion. It's an interesting discussion, very much so, but it's very long-winded. Well, before I became pagan, and there's a lot of people out there also who I've read on Instagram, Twitter, on YouTube, people putting comments on my videos and stuff, and on other people's videos, and watching discussions and so on and so forth. There's a lot of people out, and just meeting people face to face, and when you get close to them, they kind of tell you this, that they can do this. There's a few people in the world who you come across who have a natural ability to do certain things that other people can't. Okay, and I myself have always had the natural, untamed, undirected ability to almost glance into the threads of fate, so to speak. I've been able to see the future, and things have come true. A lot of what I have a sense of foreboding. I see the imminent future when I'm awake. What I mean is potentially in the next 30 minutes what might happen, or the next few seconds. And in my dreams I see much further, but and that still remains to this day. Now that I've started practicing Sailor Magic to a much higher degree, I can go further both whilst awake and whilst asleep. But whilst I'm, well, not whilst I'm asleep. Well, yeah, whilst I'm asleep, I can go even further, but I can go even further than that when in trance, and that's an important thing. But what I'm trying to say is, even before I started practicing Sailor Magic, even before I knew what it was, but before I even knew really what paganism was, I just thought it was just a religion that Celtic warriors used to follow and stuff like this. Um, um, Before I knew about anything, I had that natural ability to see into the future, but not only that, I also had the ability. My apologies for that. There's going to be a break in the video there. I just had to answer the phone. It was going. So what was I discussing? I think I was talking about. This is where my amnesia doesn't really help. I was talking about basically that. Yes, I always had that natural ability to see the future, and it's been enhanced through my practice of paganism and practice of Sailor magic, and also a bit of Gauda magic and stuff like this. Well, Gauda magic doesn't help necessarily with that, but the rune stones do help with divination, sometimes with focusing you. But it's been mostly the ability to use trances, as I say, that have enhanced my ability to see further, but not just into the future, but also into the past. I can't seem to visit the past when I'm awake, or well, sometimes when I'm asleep I can, but when I'm awake I can't visit the past at all, apart from memories. Okay, I can't visit it at all. I have to use trances to visit the past. But what I'm trying to say is I had a natural affinity, a natural ability to do this, regardless of no training, no understanding, no teaching, no guidance, nothing. I could do it naturally in a very raw, very uncontrolled form. Couldn't control when it happened necessarily. I practiced trying to control it, and I got some level of control, but it was still very untamed. I tried to interpret it, which was wrong, because of course interpreting the fates takes a lot of wisdom and a lot of intellect and knowledge, and understanding. Something which at the time, yes, I was clever, but I didn't understand what I was dealing with. And when you try and interpret the fates to your advantage, it's a bad thing to do. It's a bad thing to do, in my opinion, because unless you know what you're doing, because of course the future is never 100% certain. And I think really the other thing that I've always had a natural affinity for, and this is where it now links into the composition of fate. This is something that you may 100% disagree with, because it really is a new concept, but it's a new concept that I'm putting out there for those of you who maybe want to consider it. Before I became pagan, and still to this day now, even more so now, I've always, well, I would call myself, I used to call myself, or describe myself to myself, I never told anyone about it, as an empath. So I could see the future, which I would call a sort of precognition, and I also describe myself as an empath, because I was able to feel other people's emotions. Their emotions could then affect me. Okay, I was very intuitive on that side of things, telling what people's emotions are. Maybe I was just particularly adept at reading people's body language and stuff, but I could feel their emotions. It felt palpable to me. I could feel when they were sad. I could feel sadness within my own self. When they were happy, I was elated. Even if I was having a horrible day myself, it brought me up. So on and so on and so forth. And so I could feel other people's emotions. But I also learned that I could also influence other people's emotions. I could put my own emotions onto other people. And so if I was happy and I could see one of my friends was down in the dumps, I could go there, and I had a way of almost transferring that happiness almost, or sharing it, not transferring it because I kept it myself, but transferring it, not with just like words of, oh, it's going to be all right, mate, or anything like that. I could literally do it without words and almost make them kind of happy again. Okay, and this is something I've always been able to do. Um, and so I believe, because if you look at the bloodlines there, that empathy side of things, that empath kind of being able to influence people's emotions, isn't really put there other than maybe sorcery. So maybe I'm a, as I say, a volver, because you can get male volvers, because it would possibly be in sorcery, and obviously I've got prophecy, which I've always been able to do. But as I say, I can see into the past also, and I can see the present, the very immediate present, and stuff like this, as well as the future. Whereas volvers really were typically sort of more sort of slightly distant future, not super distant, but within a person's lifetime future. That's what their natural ability was for. And so it drew me to the fact to make a conclusion. If I'm of a Seder folk, which I believe I am, because it explains one why I was chosen by Freya when I was in a basically a near fatal car crash, when I went through my death and rebirth experience, I was chosen by Freya to remain here. Okay, in my affiliation, my sort of connection to her would make more sense if I was Sederfolk, because of course Seder is her magic. Now I may be of a giant's bloodline, but just like any other magic practitioner, but what do I think on that? First of all, I think every pagan is able to practice magic of some kind or another. You can learn it, you can practice it, as long as your faith in your gods and faith in your religion is pure and strong. You can do it. I've been able to do runestones very successfully, and that's not part of the Seder folk. That's really runestones comes in the form of Vicky, and I can't be one of all. Well, I suppose I could have all three bloodlines within me. You never know, but I don't. I think that's highly unlikely. And so I think you can learn the magics. It's just what the magics that come out of you before training, before learning, before teaching yourself things or being taught things. As I say, my abilities were prophecy to some degree, but actually interacting with the strands of fate. So being able to interact with the strands of fate, 'cause that's more than prophecy, and also not only being able to interact with strands of fate, but also, as I say, this empathy kind of thing. Okay, this ability to alter people's emotions and have my emotions altered in return. And so I feel that actually that must be part of Seder folk, and it's not another ability or another sort of power. I don't want to use the word power because it's not power, but you know what I mean. It's not another element to you. It's actually just another element of being able to read and the strands of fate. Because in conclusion, what I made was the conclusion of, well, if I can see and interact with fates, and the fates of individuals, the fates of myself, so on and so forth, then perhaps contained within fate is the information for emotion also. It would make sense, because if you're dealing with a being like ourselves, like man, who has self-consciousness, self-awareness, just like a god, okay? We can think for ourselves and we can feel, and those emotions are actually, a lot of the time, the driving force behind our actions. Our emotions tell us and guide us on how to act. We sometimes think with this, but more often we think with this. Okay, and so really for fate to be able to have a direction and purpose on Susan Rado when dealing with individuals such as the gods or man, okay, or the giants and things like that, intelligent beings basically, it must have within its composition, within its Rado and within its Ansuz, the ability to predict and influence emotions as a driving to create an ensues almost. To create a fehu even, almost within the man that we are talking about, or the god, or that whatever that we are talking about, because emotions have a very powerful fehu aspect to them. Emotions, as I say, are a driving force. They make you seek out to fulfill certain things. The emotions are the most powerful thing almost within humans that make us want to complete things. And so maybe our fehu, as I say, comes directly from the fates. And that is how we are guided along our fate path. Now, we still do have, obviously, free will. We can choose to listen to our emotions or not, but maybe emotions, as I say, come from fate. Emotions come from fate, and that is their way of trying to guide us down a certain path that they want, because fate wants, or the universe behind fate wants a certain direction with your fate. It wants you to go down a certain pathway. Now, you might veer off it, but sooner or later, it always wins. It brings you back to where you should be. And I drew this conclusion, as I say, just by simply imagining myself, well, if I'm a Seder folk, and all they have is a natural affinity for Seder magic in its completion, then maybe within Seder magic there is emotion. Because emotion is part of fate. Seder magic is completely concerned with the manipulation and interpretation of fate. Okay, and the viewing of fate. Okay, and so if I can view and manipulate fate, then maybe also, because I can also do this emotional side of things, maybe emotions are within fate. And that was my conclusion. Emotions and emotion for intelligent beings is already contained within their fate, and it's a fate's way of communicating with us our pathways. It's a thought. Tell me what you think. A new thought, new concept, it might get shot down. I'm just trying to expand our boundaries here, which I'm trying to think outside the box so we can all learn more. Thank you.